During the darkest years of the crisis of the 3rd century, there were those who attempted to build a new Roman Empire from the old decadent imperium. For 14 years, this separatist state had its own emperors, its own Pretorian Guard, even its own senate. Today, we're going to explore the numismatic history of the most successful of all Roman internal rebellions, the Imperium Galliarum, also known as the Gallic Empire, and see how the developments on its troubled history affected its own official coinage. Let's go! The year is 260 AD, and the situation in the Roman Empire is one of total chaos. Gallienus, poor old Gallienus, he really deserves more love from historians, scrambles back and forth around the empire trying to solve multiple existential threats to the existence of this empire. Barbarians plundering deep into northern Italy, the Parthians, emboldened by the capture of Gallienus' father, the previous emperor Valerian, attacked the eastern frontier with impunity, and as it was getting awfully common back in the day, the Germanic tribes across the Rhine pushed the Roman frontier, and garrisons are at their breaking point. And it was with one of these Germanic incursions into Roman lands that we see the breakaway of this new empire. Gallienus had a very competent general taking care of the western frontier, a man called Postumus, who, despite his good skills, was left with a fraction of the troops he needed to properly protect the empire, while Gallienus dealt with yet another usurper in other places. The desperate Postumus did what he could to protect the empire, to protect the Rhine frontier, and in one of such efforts, he managed to catch and crush an incursion of barbarians who were sacking the frontier settlements. In an attempt to reward his desperate troops who managed to do their job, he distributed the recovered loot between the troops instead of returning it to the imperial administration, which resulted on a direct order to give the booty back. This was the last drop that made the glass spill. Postumus marched on the imperial capital of Germania Inferior and killed Gallienus' son, Seleninus, who was placed there as an imperial figurehead, while Gallienus tended to more urgent issues. He immediately declared the region would take care of itself, as the central administration clearly wasn't able to handle the chaotic situation all over the empire. Soon, the entirety of Gaul, Britannia, and Hispania joined him in the newly formed Gallic Empire. Postumus would establish mints in Colonia Agrippina, modern-day Cologne in Germany, and Augusta Treverorum, Trier, also in modern-day Germany. Some sources say that the Gallic Empire might also have had a mint at Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, France, but this is nowadays largely dismissed. So whenever you see, when you're shopping for a coin, a Gallic coin from Lugdunum, it's likely incorrect. Having seized control of the silver mines in Hispania, Postumus decided to do a very curious move numismatically. He established his own coinage, still in the denarius standard of the Central Empire, but of superior quality, at the beginning of around 20% silver. This is actually a good hook to talk about our first coin of the day. Let's look at this Antoninianus from the earlier issues of Postumus, probably between 260 and 264, minted at the main mint of Trier. Quality control was all over the place at that time. Notice how despite the silver being of reasonably good quality and appearance, as well as the design is also nice, the flan is completely ragged and irregular. They just wanted to make as many of these as quickly as possible. On the obverse, we are greeted by a very well-made bust of the Gallic Emperor. The coinage of Postumus is a breath of fresh air from the low-quality portraiture of the period. Back in the Central Empire, at this point, it gets harder and harder to find a properly beautiful portrait of Gallienus or Valerian, while the Gallic coins of Postumus are most of the time struck in really good style and well-executed portraits. Well, as we can see, this gentleman sports a very respectful beard, the radiate crown, typical of the Antoninianus, and a drapery over his military cuirass. The legends are pretty simple and read, Imperator Caesar Postumus, Pius Felix Augustus. Heading to the reverse, we have one of the most prolific and common designs, moneta, literally the incarnation of coinage. She is seen holding a set of scales and a cornucopia, the horn of abundance. This is a really cool interpretation of the idea of coinage and commerce using coins. The goddess coinage is responsible for the distribution, hence the scales, of the wealth of the nation, symbolized by the cornucopia. The legends simply reinforce and state the name of the deity, Moneta Augusta, the good coinage brought by the emperor. As a curiosity, here's a later coin of the same moneta type, but with, as you can see, much less silver. Postumus, before the end of his reign, lost control of Hispania, who sided with Gallienus once again, and its silver mines were not available for him anymore. So he simply couldn't maintain his policy of high-quality coinage anymore, and soon the purity of the Antoniniani plummeted from 20% all the way to like 8 or 7%. As we can see here, this cannot have more than 10% silver. It is very brown, coppery in appearance. But before going forward in time, we need to take a closer look at the coinage of Postumus. It is special. Everyone minimally familiarized with Roman numismatics can notice that certain emperors just have good coinage during their reigns. Roman coins look great overall, but emperors such as, for example, Augustus, Nero, Hadrian, Probus, have coin issues compared to their contemporaries that set them apart for one reason or another. Quality, variety, artistic merit. Could it have been because they actually asked for specific messages to be passed on coins? Maybe they had an active interest on art and the extra funding to arts spilled into good craftsmen making dies and good coin art? We don't know for sure, but Postumus was one of such men. You see, the concept of the Gallic Empire and what Postumus wanted to do was to make a new Roman Empire which didn't really differ much from the Central Empire. It didn't differ much on its values, its customs or institutions. Everyone was still just as Roman, and Postumus needed to show he was here to make a new Rome, which was the same Rome, but better, really. This meant an effort to enact its own imperial cult, and my god, did he do a good job with the coinage. The Antoninianus was a good quality coin, but it didn't change much during his reign, like the styles and the busts, but the gold coinage of this man really is something else. Some of the most beautiful gold coins the Romans ever struck, in my opinion, were made right at the bottom point of the Roman coinage quality, if you think about it. This must have been an effort on his part to issue prestige pieces that would circulate between the rich and powerful and set the tone for his claim to be a better alternative to the Central Empire. Let's look at some examples worthy of note. We start by this really interesting aureus where Postumus and Hercules are depicted on opposite sides of the coin. Of course, Postumus could not miss the opportunity of using his position of power and his very respectable beard to compare himself to Hercules. Postumus is seen wearing a crested helmet, almost like Mars, almost like another god, the god of war, while Hercules, on the other face, is shown with an even more impressive beard. And if the comparison wasn't clear already, this next coin leaves no doubts he wanted to be associated with Hercules. So Hercules and Postumus are seen side by side, Postumus on the first plan, Hercules in the second, clearly stating he's some sort of manifestation of the divine pantheon. It's really hard to set them apart. This coin is spectacular. 4 portraits, all masterfully executed. On the reverse, we have Victory with her little wings and carrying the laurel wreath. And behind her, Felicitas, happiness. 1 man, 3 deities. He was definitely trying to re-establish the imperial cult, but this time around himself. And I also have to call your attention to the impressive facing busts in some very rare of his aureus. Accomplishing good-looking frontal busts on coins, it's a challenge. It requires a level of skill very superior to just normal lateral portraits. The proportions, it's all much different. One would imagine the very best engravers were stationed at Rome, still under the Central Empire's command. But as we can see here, the Gallic mints still had master engravers on their disposal. This sent a much more powerful message than we think. While Gallienus was issuing smaller, wretched aureus weighing a fraction of the normal weight, Postumus was churning out very impressive coins that made a strong statement with the elites that, hey, I am clearly superior to the main guy. I should be the main guy. Sadly for Postumus, not even his political and military prowess would protect him from being yet another victim of his own soldiers. Rome's most powerful usurper would fall after besieging and killing Laelianus, an usurper. While his troops tried to pillage the usurper's city, Postumus tried to stop them. Man, bad mistake. You don't anger your troops during the 3rd century, or you die. And that's exactly what happened. Postumus enraged the troops and was killed by his own men. So he was replaced by another general, Marius, who seized control for a very short period. His coins, just like those of Laelianus, the usurper, are very rare. But Marius himself was defeated and replaced by the next real ruler of the Gallic Empire, Victorinus, who reigned between 268 and 271. By the time of Victorinus, the Antoninianus, the common coin we can now collect, as we can see, was already heavily debased. The Gallic Empire was starting to fall into disarray, and so did its coinage. Let's take a look at this Antoninianus of him, this time struck at Cologne. On the obverse, we once again see another Gallic fellow with an impressive beard, with the legends spelling his new imperial title, Imperator Caesar Victorinus Pius Felix Augustus. Although the alloy of the coin is now very poor and they were struck by the many millions, which actually makes these coins some of the most affordable Roman coins you can get, notice that the portrait, it's still made in reasonable quality. Sadly, we can't say the same for the reverse. Just look at this. The need to issue lots of coins due to the strong debasement of the time forced the mint workers to use the reverse dice way past the point that they would be reconditioned or just thrown away altogether. Contrasting to the sharp obverse, having such a weak reverse means that this coin didn't really circulate. It just came out of the mint looking like that, as the devices on the reverse die were almost gone by simple wear. But we can make a drawing and show what it's supposed to be here. So we have an image of the god Sol, the sun god, with his radiant crown, holding a whip, and the legends Invicto, or unconquered, referring to Victorinus, as well as the god, which used to be called the unconquered sun. The gold coinage of Victorinus is also worthy of note, although not as inspired and fantastic as Postumus's. It still has the same theme and quality. It's almost as impressive. Victorinus is often found in half-body poses, wearing full military armor, decorated shields, and carrying a spear on his shoulders. Quite good coins. He's often also accompanied by deities on his aureus, like on this example where he's in company of Artemis, or Diana, as the Roman calls, Victory, as well as Felicitas. Victorinus also would, of course, be murdered in 271. Interestingly enough, not by his disgruntled soldiers, but by one of his close officials, as according to history he made advances on his wife. After a quick squabble for power, and a certain Domitian II rising and falling very fast, as just 2 crappy copper coins from this man are known, we get to our last 2 of the official leaders of the Gallic Empire, Tetricus and his son, Tetricus II. By the time of Tetricus, the Gallic coinage was as degraded as the ones from the Central Empire. Times were just as tough. The lack of precious metals, aligned with the need to pay for so many troops to keep the Germanic peoples and the incursions from the Central Empire at bay, led to some pretty miserable coins being struck for Tetricus and his son. Coins were debased to a mere 2% silver, although by looking at these pieces, I would argue they are just pure copper by the time. And they're also reduced in weight. They rarely reach over 3 grams. So let's take a look at this example from Tetricus I, the senior emperor between 271 and 274. We can see yet another man with some very impressive genes for a full beard. Looking to the right, with the radiate crown and draperies over his military cuirass. This particular example has reasonable striking quality for the obverse. Some are barely recognizable. And we can also read the full legends. Imperator Caesar, Tetricus, Pius Felix, Augustus. But as we go to the reverse, oh boy, this is awful. The design is barely recognizable from the absolutely obliterated reverse die. But once again, the drawings are here to save the day and for us to make sense of what is going on. We have Pax, the goddess of peace, holding a palm branch and a scepter. The legends, Pax Augusta, translated to the peace brought by the emperor, which we can all agree is a desperate wishful thinking, since the coins was struck at some of the most violent times. The empire, it was one of the most violent times the empire has ever saw before its fall a couple of years later. Tetricus had a son he elevated to the position of Caesar, Tetricus II. So let's take a look at another piece, this time struck for the young boy, also at the Mint of Cologne. Compared to the other one, this one is actually in pretty good shape for the type. Fortunately, we finally get something different than a man with an epic beard. We have a young boy wearing normal imperial draperies and once again the radiate crown. The legends proclaim his official name as the heir to the Gallic Empire, Gaius Pius Esuvius Tetricus Caesar. On the reverse we have Spes, the goddess of hope, a very common design put on coinages of Caesars and young figures of power, as of course they saw young men as promises of stable and long future rulers. So the legends, Spes Augusta, means something like the hopes for the empire. In 274, Tetricus would be ousted by Aurelian on the Battle of Chalons. Some say the battle actually never happened, with Tetricus instead surrendering himself to Aurelian in exchange for his life and the one of his son. Both were brought to Rome and displayed in a triumph, and then disappeared from the historical record shortly after, likely leaving the rest of their lives in seclusion or minor political positions. So the Gallic Empire ceased to exist, not with a whole lot of resistance really. All thanks to the great Aurelian. This man deserves a video for himself, a special one, but that will have to wait for another day. Collecting coins from the Gallic Empire in the Antoninianus denomination is one of the easiest goals for a beginner numismatist. If we exclude the very rare and ephemeral internal usurpers and stick to Postumus, Victorinus, Tetricus I, and Tetricus II, even if you get multiple coins for each emperor, they're generally very common, very easy to find, and very affordable, even in good grade. Yes, they don't look spectacular, although the coins of Postumus and Victorinus can actually look pretty decent. No coin really commands much of a premium, and it is a very easy and interesting set one could collect of a small time period, which is very interesting and easy to research. So what about you collectors? Have you got a coin from the Gallic Empire? Let us know in the comment section down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel. I hope you enjoyed the video, happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.